Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Hector, for that wonderful introduction. So again, my name is Nidia Bautista. I'm a fourth-year major in Latin American Latino Studies and Politics, combined major. So before beginning, I just want to introduce a little bit of why I became interested, and Hector touched on that a little bit. So my research is on Mexican solidarity with the Salvadoran Revolution. As a junior scholar, my motivation to participate in the faculty mentor program was to engage in a research project that began to piece together a memoria histórica, to analyze the experience of two Mexican women in solidarity with the revolutionary struggle in El Salvador. My quest to understand solidarity began when I was a second year at UCSC. It was an LELS ADB, Latin American Social Movements, taught by Professor Hector Perlo, of course, that first introduced me to the histories of social movements in Latin America, specifically in Central America. This interest led me to become an intern at the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador, CISPES. I worked in Washington, D.C. for 3 months. As an intern, I organized popular education workshops on neoliberalism in Latin America, but also I began to learn more about the development of solidarity networks. Sitting at the desk in a small office in Columbia Heights, the Salvadoran community of DC, I began to wonder what bounded, if anything, us as members of CISPES, considering we came from different parts of the country, from different classes, and from different ethnicities. A curiosity to understand the intersection between identity and struggle, between personal experience and social change, thus informs the core question I attempt to untangle in my study. So the title of my research project is Mexican Solidarity with the Salvadoran Revolution, Understanding Solidarity as a Mutually Empowering Process. So I chose to begin the PowerPoint presentation with a quote I think resonates strongly on how I feel solidarity is understood in the study I conduct. I don't believe in charity. I believe in solidarity. Charity is so vertical. It goes from the top to the bottom. Solidarity is horizontal. It respects the other person. I have a lot to learn from other people. And this quote is from Eduardo Galeano, a Latin American philosopher. So an overview of my study, I begin with my research question, my theoretical framework of solidarity, some background on the Salvadoran Revolution, and then I begin to unpack what was the Central American Peace and Solidarity Movement, known as the CAPSM. And within that, I focus on Mexican solidarity, analyzing La Onda Latina, which was a radio broadcast that was broadcasted in 1980 that talks about Chicano solidarity with the Salvadoran Revolution. And then I go on to talk about the two Mexicanas that I interviewed for my project, Ángela Zambrano and Isaura Rivera. And I finish with my conclusion. So my research question is, what motivated Mexicans to join the solidarity movement with the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, FMLN's revolutionary struggle? I conduct an analysis of the role of Mexican political agency through in-depth interviews with two Mexican women, Ángela Zambrano and Isaura Rivera. This is to help us understand the formations of solidarity relationships. So the theoretical framework is, solidarity in this study is understood as a mutually empowering process towards social change that has as its base the formation of a critical consciousness. Critical consciousness educates people about oppressive elements in their own lives and in society, and encourages people to begin to act proactively to build a democratic society. Solidarity can then be understood in two parts: the development of a critical consciousness of inequalities perpetuated by oppression in society, and a movement toward a transformation of society that challenges unequal and oppressive relationships. So some background on the Salvadoran Revolution. The Salvadoran Civil War is the third longest civil war in Latin America after the Colombian and Guatemalan civil wars. From 1980 to 1992, the Salvadoran Civil War was a conflict between the right-wing Nationalist Republican Party, known as Arena, and the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, which is an umbrella organization of 5 left-wing guerrilla groups. During this time, the U.S. government, the Reagan administration, provided around $1.5 million a day in military and economic aid. in support of the Arena government. So during this time, the government harshly repressed dissent, and at least 70,000 people lost their lives in killings and bombing raids waged against civilians throughout the countryside, as well as different guerrilla groups. However, enduring popular resistance and push for revolutionary change from peasants, trade unionists, teachers, students, journalists, human rights advocates, priests, and anyone in the interest of the poor majority in El Salvador. So here's a picture of some peasant guerrilla fighters. So in the US, we see the development of the Central American Peace and Solidarity Movement, and that was a transnational movement that linked US and Salvadoran individuals and organizations in the US with organizations in El Salvador. So among the different activities, thousands of activists in the US organized and staged protests, participated in vigils in honor of victims of the wars in Central America, and participated in a delegation to countries in the region. So one of the strongest pushes of the CAPSUM was to challenge the foreign policy that was affecting El Salvador, considering there was $1.5 million a day being funneled into the country. So in the research about CAPSUM, we see, I noticed that authors talked about testimonies as critical consciousness producers. So testimonies and narratives that came from Salvadoran activists and revolutionaries in El Salvador were seen as effective tools to educate distant audiences about political, social, and economic issues and injustice. In the CAPSUM, symbolic narratives of repression in Central America provided a human face to the victims of repression and economic exploitation. Also, until recently, a scholar started to unpack the role of Salvadoran agency in creating solidarity, because in a lot of the scholarship, there was a huge focus on white activist solidarity and how they participated. But in understanding the role of Salvadoran agency, we see that they're the political agents who sort of stimulated the solidarity movement. So until recently, scholars have identified US middle-class activists as the purposive actors in solidarity movements, and in doing so, systematically overlook the agency of the oppressed and relegate their voices to historical silence. So in my research, I look at the experience of two Mexican women who were organizing in the US. So my method is a qualitative analysis based on oral history method to analyze Ángela Zambrano and Isaura Rivera's experiences in the solidarity movement with the Salvadoran Revolution. An oral history analysis will enable us to recover the actions of individual people, such as the significance of their own lives, having been a part of, belonged to, and participated in a past event, highlighting their personal memories and collective memory. So what I analyzed is La Onda Latina, which was a radio broadcast under a radio show called The Mexican Experience that was broadcasted from UT Austin. And they sort of talk about Chicano solidarity with El Salvador. And then I go on to talk about Ángela Zambrano and Isaura Rivera. And some of the three themes I found in my research is their role and political agency as a result of their experiences as undocumented women living in Los Angeles, California. Also, the next theme is the proximity to Salvadoran activists. So the documentaries, testimonies, and friendships they came into contact with, and ultimately, the theme of transcending identity barriers and solidarity. So La Onda Latina. Political unrest in El Salvador was broadcasted on November 1st, 1980. Radio host Rosalinda Fregoso discusses the political situation in El Salvador and with Salvadoran revolutionary Carlos Galvan and Chicana activist Odelia Talamantes. In the interview, Talamantes explains her understanding of solidarity. I think that Chicanos and Salvadorans are able to make the connections by being able to realize that they are in the United States as a minority, and as a minority face a lot of racial and economic pressures by which they are treated unequal. And I think that they see that they are, in a sense, an oppressed people. And in this way, I think they are able to relate with the struggles of the people in Latin America. So, my first respondent is Ángela Zambrano. Ángela was born in Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, Mexico. She migrated to Los Angeles, California in 1963. In 1970, she attended Chefi Community College, where she began to take Chicana studies classes. And in the interview, she expressed the impact of Chicano studies and ethnic studies in her own politicization and critical consciousness formation. She explains that it was through Chicana studies, that she began to understand the overall oppressive situation and reality that Latinos in general found themselves in the US. It was in one of these classes of Chicana studies that she first encountered organizers with the UFW. And Ángela's story is very interesting because you see this progression of her politicization and her alignment with different movements in the US. So you see her involvement with the UFW, and then these experiences eventually influenced her to enroll in the People's College of Law, which is very independent, very left-wing, I would say, college of law, like law school in Los Angeles. Through her enrollment in People's College of Law, she begins to see the influx of Salvadoran migrants and refugees in Los Angeles. And when she would explain, when she would walk to the university, which is located really close to MacArthur Park, if you know where Los Angeles is, it's close to downtown Los Angeles. So in her trip to her classes, she explained how she would see protests of Salvadorans in MacArthur Park, and how she would see this on a daily basis when she would be walking to school. So she explained that she became interested in the marches, and she became intrigued in what was happening, and she eventually started participating, and she started learning from the Salvadoran activists. So through these different events, we see that she becomes involved with the Solidarity movement, and eventually she becomes the first national coordinator of the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. And as a Mexicana, she becomes like the leader and the president of this organization. Currently, Zambrano is the executive director of the Central American Refugee Center in Los Angeles, known as Garesen. So Isaura Rivera. Isaura Rivera was born in San Luis, Sonora, Mexico. She migrated to the US at the age of 16 in 1975. When she migrated, she moved to the community of Echo Park in Los Angeles, and there she started to attend Evans Community Adult School. In a similar way that Zambrano became exposed to the activism of Salvadorans through her involvement with the People's College of Law, Isaura Rivera, through her attendance in Evans Community Adult School, she befriended Central American activists, and in particular, she befriended a Nicaraguan activist who introduced her to the Casa Nicaragua. And the Casa Nicaragua is a center where she began to watch documentaries and of what was going on in Nicaragua in particular. So her involvement with the Central American movement was through Nicaragua initially. From there, she became the president of Asociación de Mujeres Progresistas de El Salvador, which is the Association of Progressive Women in El Salvador in 1986.